welcome to the Lead Every Day Show. I'm Randy Gravett.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, it is hard to believe we are this last week of September here. I don't know if you've been watching as much football the last few weeks as I have, but I've been noticing that a lot of these games are won and lost in the fourth quarter. And again, hard to believe, but we're about to go into the fourth quarter of 2025 here, and I think it's got me thinking about some stuff that we need to talk about today. So hope you're doing good, man. I'm excited for all the people that are listening today. We're going to see if we can add some value.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a really challenging time of year for a lot of leaders because you're trying to finish strong, but you've also got your eye on the future. Hopefully, you've got your eye on the upcoming year. And so I think that makes this challenging and a very important time of year.
It certainly is. You know, our leadership team just came off of our own planning retreat the last few days, and we had just a great time thinking through this next year. And it gave us a chance to look back a little bit on the first part of the year. But really, my goal is to not wait till 2026. What can we do to run up the score here in the fourth quarter? So we want to get that right. But one of the things that you and I both have valued so much through the years is taking part of that fourth quarter and really thinking through what is the plan for the next year. Mark, it's amazing how many leaders I meet that don't really like planning. And it's kind of scary when you look at all the stuff that's, I guess, duct taped together, people just flying by the seat of their pants. It's kind of scary, really.
It is. And my encouragement to leaders is don't miss this strategic opportunity for influence. I have become more and more convinced over the years that helping to chart the course for your team and your organization is one of your greatest opportunities and your responsibility. I mean, people are looking to us as leaders for guidance as we move into a new year. And I hate it when leaders miss that opportunity.
That's so true. Okay, so I got a question. Are we going to talk about organizational planning or personal planning? Which way you want to go here?
Well, I want to talk about both, but that's probably 2 episodes. So let's focus today on the organizational, and we'll do the personal next week. How about that?
That sounds great. Okay, so we're going to start it off here by talking about why planning is so important. I'll kick it off. I think strategy is fundamentally about your choices. I know you've written about the power of choices in so many of your resources through the years. I think, one of them that comes to mind is when you wrote Smart Leadership, you talked about all the leaders that are in quicksand, their choices can get them out. I think the same thing is true here when it comes to our planning, that it really does help us sift through our choices. It shows us really, if we have a great plan, we know what to say yes to. We know what to say no to. We know where to rally our resources. We know how to structure all that stuff. So it's so much, it's so important for us to have a plan. Really, again, I guess I'll just simplify it and say, we know what to say yes to, what to say no to. That to me, that's the power of the plan at its fundamental level.
Yeah. I give you another one. My teams over the years have probably gotten tired of hearing me say this, but you get no credit for doing the wrong things well. And so many leaders have built teams of amazing people, high energy, high intellect, high passion. But if you don't help guide them, they could end up doing the wrong things really, really well. And I think planning is our opportunity to get people aligned and focused on what matters most.
Yeah, that reminds me of the old story about the guy who said they were heading in the wrong direction, but we're making good time. There's nothing good about that. So that's true. Well, I'll go back to something I alluded to just a second ago. I think the other thing that planning does, and let's just call it out specifically, it helps us allocate really our people and our money, our cash, our resources. Right. When we think about it specifically, that plan, it shows us where to put resources, and it actually helps us align the structure better. You and I had a conversation with a guy years ago, very successful guy who scaled a lot of stuff. And he said, you got to, first of all, if you're going to scale something, you start with what you're trying to do. That's your plan. And then I loved it. He said, you got to ask yourself, who do you need to help you? Because you're usually trying to do stuff bigger than what you can do. And personal planning is important. But we think of organizational planning, we do have all these people that are at our they're there to help us. I mean, right? That's why they signed up. That's why they believe in the vision, or they could go work somewhere else. And so how we allocate those people, again, I think it goes back to that plan. And then do we have the resources to help us pull off what we're trying to do? That actually, ironically, was the third thing that the guy told us that you got to have. You got to have the money to pay for the people and to pay for whatever it is you're trying to do. So,
So let me also, maybe this is a blinding flash of the obvious. The plan should be designed, should be architected to improve performance. I mean, if a business or a team, an organization is not performing well, I would say one of several things has to be true. A, there was not a plan. B, it was not well conceived, right? You can create a bad plan. C, maybe the world changed and you have not reacted, responded, or adapted accordingly. Or maybe you just didn't run the play. I remember years ago, we were at our 6-month review on a plan, and we were looking at a key metric, and it had not moved. And so someone on the team suggested, maybe we need to change the goal. You know, we got 6 months to go, but this one appears to be out of reach. And I said, well, maybe we need to adjust the goal. But let me ask a different question. What were the strategies and tactics we agreed upon that would drive this key performance indicator? And somebody referenced the things in the plan. And I said, have we done those things? And they said, yeah, we really didn't do those things. I said, well, then you don't know if you ought to adjust the goal or not. You've not even run the play. And so get the right plan, do your very best to make it on point to help you accomplish your goals and your objectives and your performance metrics, and then run the play. And that's ultimately why we do planning. It's not for the exercise, it's to drive performance. That's why I get excited about planning. I know that may sound weird, but I got excited because a lot of the games are won or lost when the coaches create the game plan.
That's so good. Okay, so we got a bunch of people listening here who may be good at planning or may want to plan better. You know, they're all over the place, I'm assuming here. And there probably are some people that just don't plan. And then like, I don't really have a plan. I know I probably need to. I want us to take our next few minutes and think about how would we help leaders, anybody who would choose to listen. And by the way, for those of you out there listening, thanks for supporting what we do, for sharing with, you know, all the people that you share with. We appreciate that. But Mark, how would we help them do planning well? Like even me, I want to get better at planning. I know you're trying to get better at planning every year. Like what are some things that you think we could share today that would help people do this at a higher level?
Well, I'm going to share a story. I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but I had the opportunity many years ago to lead the planning efforts for Chick-fil-A Incorporated. And we had a team, a cross-functional team put together, and we were allocating budget and headcount for the entire organization. And we had to approve the plans, of course, before we could allocate the budget and the headcount. And I hired a consultant, a high-powered consultant, to help me think about the process, because this was a lot of money and this was a lot of people. And I've already shared some of my bias and my passion for the importance of planning, but I really wanted to steward this opportunity well. And the essence of what this person shared with me was so elegant and simple. It took me a while to process this. And her counsel, best summarized, was you have to ask the right questions to lead planning well.
That's really interesting. Okay, so is there a magic set of questions? Like, did she give you the questions?
Well, she gave me some, but I would tell you, having been actively engaged in organizational planning, team planning, department planning, personal planning now for decades, I've used hundreds of questions. So I don't think there's a magic set, but I think you've got to be thoughtful, or you've got to ask the questions that are going to help you move to a preferred future. And so I think what we'll do today, let's just share some of our favorite questions, knowing there is no magic set or magic list. I want to encourage those that are watching or listening to think about your own questions that may be better than the ones that we're going to ask, or questions that would supplement the ones we're going to ask. But I think we can give you enough questions to get your wheels turning, and hopefully to get the heads, the hearts, and the hands of your people fully engaged.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Why don't you kick us off? Give us what's the first question you want to go with?
Here's my first one, and this is one that I ask a lot, almost always in the context of planning, is what do you want to be true in a decade that's not true today?
Okay. Wait, whoa. A decade? So are we talking about a 10-year plan here, or an annual plan?
No, I ask that question even when we're building an annual plan, because wouldn't it be cool if your annual plans were moving you toward a preferred future?
Yeah, right? I love that.
So some people do planning, but it doesn't have the long view. And one of the things I'm convinced of, like to my core, is the best decisions are made with a long-term perspective. And there are things that your team and your organization needs that you cannot accomplish in a year. It's just too big, too complex. But you can certainly take steps if you know what that preferred future looks like. Now, I've been challenged, particularly by young people, and I'm just saying, I'm a reporter here. I'm no judgment, but I've had a lot of young people tell me they can't think that far in the future. That's probably another conversation for another day. If you're one of those people that cannot envision a future a decade from now, try 5 years, try 3 years. But I want to challenge you to stretch your thinking, because there's something you probably want to accomplish, maybe something you need to accomplish that you just can't get done in a year. So, but yeah, I always start with what's that preferred future, and let's see if we can take steps in the next 12 months, because most of the plans I've created over the years and been part of are 1-year plans. We did have a season at the Chicken when we built 3-year plans. But even then, we always came back and did an annual operating plan against that 3-year plan. So try to stretch your timeline a little bit, and be as specific as you can, knowing that you're going to hold it all loosely. If you want to be in a new country in 10 years, well, okay, that doesn't mean there's anything specific you do this year, but maybe you visit that country if you've never been there. I mean, you can start thinking about things that would, maybe you start building strategic relationships with other individuals or organizations in that country that you want to go to be in 10 years. I mean, you can see how these things can ladder up over time.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe for our younger listeners, some language that I heard years ago, I'm sure you've heard. You remember when Henry Cloud talks about the idea of playing the movie forward? I like that mindset. He shares this story. I heard him share this story one time. He was talking about this woman who was considering going and getting a degree. And he said, I want you to, ask yourself, what's keeping you from doing that? And, she had these excuses and everything. And one of the things Henry said was, he said, if you'll play the movie forward, 4 years from now is going to come. And it's going, you go ahead and look at that date on the calendar. And even if you're young, we think 4 years is never going to happen, but it's going to happen. And he said, you're either going to have that degree in 4 years or you won't. And he said, it's actually that plan that you're going to implement on day one. And there's going to be, I like the way you said, ladder up. I mean, there's a curriculum if we're going to sign up for a degree, but I think our plan, I know you've done this before, Mark. You even talk about a 30-year plan and having a long-term view. And then you have this short-term plan to help you take a step toward the long-term view. And it typically, a lot of things are not like you think they're going to be 30 years later, but man, to know that you've been purposeful and intentional in every step that you've taken along the way, or in even most of the steps you've taken along the way, versus I'm young and it won't matter. And it'll, it's whatever's happens. I don't think we want to be gambling our life away on a maybe, you know what I'm saying? So sure. I like that.
Yeah. And let me say, you knew that I would throw this in at some point in this conversation. One of my favorite quotes from Peter Drucker, for those that don't know the name Peter Drucker, one of the great management and leadership thinkers of the last 2,000 years, maybe the best management and leadership thinker of the last 2,000 years. And he said the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Yeah, I love that.
So if you want a degree in 4 years, then you go do that. But you're not probably going to do that unless that's the future you're trying to create. And I think that's a great principle in life. I mean, I think it's why some people put money in their 401k, because they envision a retirement when they don't have to eat cat food, right? And so, okay, what have I got to do today to see that that happens? And they create that future because they saw it. You're probably not going to create a preferred future unless you've got some idea of what it looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I love that reminder. I just love that reality of saying, put yourself a decade down the road and what do you want to be true? I think that's awesome. Okay, here's another question. What have we learned over the last year that we think would help us be more successful over the next year? I don't want to just look into the future, into the decade coming, or even into the year coming. I think there's some stuff that we can learn from what's happened in the last year, and we can make some adjustments. We talked about this a few weeks ago with halftime almost, but now as we're thinking about a whole year, we've got a lot of stuff that we've learned. There's a lot of data that we have. There's a lot of, turnover maybe that's happened, a lot of stuff. And you've said before on here that experience, somebody said one time, experience is the best teacher. You reminded us that it's actually, somebody had told you that it's evaluated experience. It really doesn't do you any good to go through a bunch of stuff if you don't think about what you went through and make the necessary adjustment. So I think that's a good question. If I'm planning for my next year, especially headed toward the next decade, even if you want to think longer term, what have I been learning that I need to, what do I want to do differently? And I always say, I've said on here so many times before that different is not always better. I mean, there's some things you're doing you should keep doing, but better is always going to be different. And so what didn't go well over these last few months, year, and what changes do I need to make? And I want to put that into my plan.
Sure. I mean, the best leaders learn from the past. You just don't want to live there, right? What you ought to learn something. And what worked, what didn't work, what could you tweak, what could you refine, what should you never do again, what should you do a lot more of? And if you do this over time, you'll begin to pick up patterns, and you'll say, you know what? I've learned this lesson before, or maybe not, but I've repeated some of the same mistakes. What am I going to do differently? But you've got to invest some time looking back. And so that's always, however you ask that question, that's part of my annual planning every year. I don't want to hit my head on the same log again.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so you got another question? What will we ask next?
Well, I would ask, what are your specific goals? Like it's great to have aspirations, and I'm all about high aspirations. I want to be more fit, or I want to be more healthy, or we want to improve sales. I had a leader tell me a version of that he wanted to improve sales. And I said, well, I want you to improve sales too. I said, let me ask you this. Do you have any specific goal? No, I just want to improve sales. I said, okay, so we get 12 months from now. Are you going to be happy if sales are up 1%? He said, well, probably not. I said, 1.5%? He said, yeah, that's probably not enough to make me happy. 2%? He said, I don't know. I said, well, what would make you happy? He said, well, probably a 10% would be happy. And I said, well, would that be a worthy goal? Is that totally absurd? It's like, well, I guess not. But it started with an aspiration. Start there. If you can come up with a few very thoughtful goals, that'll drive a lot of activity. It should guide a lot of thinking even before the activity. Again, an example, if your goal is 1% better on anything, you could probably get by just doing what you're doing a little harder, a little faster. But if you have a 10 or 15 or 20 or 30% goal, well, you're probably going to need a fundamentally different approach. So goals are really important. And there are other reasons goals matter, but that's one of the planning questions. Can you identify some key goals that your team or your department or your organization needs to pursue over the next year?
Mark, I think so many organizations set goals, and those are they can be just catalytic toward performance. I mean, it's amazing what happens when we start measuring stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about measurement in a few minutes. But when you set that goal and it gives some people something to aspire to, it's great. But I've noticed so many organizations, they'll have the goals, they'll write them down, they may even post them in the break room, or everybody gets a memo, or we have the annual meeting, we talk about the goals. But if we're not careful, those things can honestly almost become useless if we don't pay attention to the goals. I've noticed at times we can have a list of goals, stick them in a drawer in the desk, and never really think about them because the business is just going crazy, and we got a lot of stuff going on, and we've said it here before, we can begin to confuse activity with accomplishment if we're not careful. We got to stay locked in on those goals. And I know you've talked about in the past the power of a goal champion. Can you talk about that here for a second? Because I think as we're planning, if we're going to set goals, we may want to identify some people who are going to take ownership of that goal and keep us all locked in on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to say something about the goal champion, but let me back up half a step. If you just file them away, then they may or may not probably didn't help you set strategy. They probably didn't help you allocate resources and funding, because if you want to accomplish something big, you may have to put people on it. You may have to put money on it. So a goal that's filed away, it's on your laptop or it's in your desk,
in your folder, yeah, whatever.
It's probably not doing it any good. Now, one of the mechanisms you just mentioned is a goal champion. And I've begun talking about this differently, because here's what I've run into. In some organizations, they'll give entire responsibility and accountability for the goal to an individual. That's not what we're talking about. What you really want for your big goals is you want these to be shared goals. We've talked about this before. When does a team really become a team? When you're pursuing shared goals. I had a leader one time, and he was struggling with performance. And I began to ask him questions, and I may not have masked my intention very well, because he said, "You're trying to find out if I've got goals." And I said, "Well, do you have goals?" He said, "Sure, we've got goals." And he said, "Joe has a marketing goal, and Sally has a food safety goal, and Sam has a customer service goal." And I said, "Oh, so your team doesn't have any goals?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Those are individual goals. I mean, you want those to be shared goals. That would have been a totally different conversation if he had said, our leadership team has the following 3 or 4 goals, and Sam and Sue and whoever are the goal champions. The goal champion is the person that keeps the goal front and center. They're the individual that ensures the right people are paying attention to the goal. They're the ones ensuring that there's adequate conversation when you're off track on the accomplishment of your goal. They're the ones that raises their hand and says, we may need to run a different play because what we're currently doing is not moving us towards our goal. So they have some enhanced responsibility, but I'm still thinking if you've got a significant goal, it needs to be a shared goal.
That's such a great reminder there, the goal champion and having a shared goal. Okay, so I got another question I would want to ask my team if we're setting goals together. And here it is. What obstacles or barriers do we anticipate as we pursue these goals? I wish I could give everybody a leadership Waze app. If I'm going to go somewhere, I can put my directions in Waze, and it knows there's traffic up here. You're going to want to take that road instead of this one. I think sometimes we don't take the time to, as we're pursuing a goal, we don't take the time to look at, like, this is the obstacle that's going to pop up, and you're not going to be able to go at this as hard or fast as you want. You may need to do something a little bit differently. And then what can we begin to do to remove those obstacles? It's so disheartening to see a team give up because they didn't really think about, well, we're not going to have the resources to do this, or we don't have the people to do that. And so a lot of different things can be barriers in our pursuit of our goal. But I just want to encourage you, as you plan this year, as you start thinking about this next year, you give some time to what are the impediments that could get in the way and keep you from where you're trying to go.
Yeah. And let me enhance, add one little piece to that. I agree 100%, but here's the truth. If you start brainstorming potential barriers or obstacles to any goal, you're probably going to come up with a long list because there are a lot of things that can thwart your best efforts. There's another piece that I recommend is to rank those. Rank them based on likelihood and potential impact. And then you go back and say, all right, we think these are the 3 most likely high impact barriers or obstacles that we're going to encounter. Then you say, what can we do now proactively to address the root causes of those obstacles? Again, you may not guess correctly, but at least you've been thoughtful, because if you come up with 40 potential barriers, you really can't attack all of those. So refine your list and go after the ones that you think are going to be the most likely culprits and see if you can eliminate them.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's talk money here for a second. I think anytime we're thinking about our planning, actually, there's a great book that Bob Beal wrote years ago called Master Planning. And one of the things he talks about in there is like, don't forget the money. It's going to cost you something to run this plan, or we might say to run the play. I want to make sure that as you're planning, whoever's listening, you're thinking about what's it going to cost to do this, and can we afford to do it? I mean, it's great to have these dreams and goals and a vision, whatever, but if we can't afford to run the play, then we're going to have to dial it back and make sure that we're running the play that we can afford to run, because we know that cash is going to be required if we're going to, and it can be anything from, can we afford the people that we're going to need to help us, or can we afford the software or whatever, fill in your blank. There's just going to be a lot of things that are going to be a demand on your cash. And so you need to think about that as you're planning.
Yeah. And let me say, what's the term? An unfunded mandate is crazy, where you tell somebody to in an organizational context that they need to accomplish X, Y, Z, and they say it's going to cost $1 million. And you go, well, you don't have the money, but that's still your goal. Don't do that. That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, I've seen numerous examples over the years, but a very mature response several years back is a senior leadership team had a goal. They gave it to a team and said, go do planning. The team came back, and I was privy to all of this. And the team said, here's the plan. And wow, it looks really good. And here's what it's going to cost to run the play. And senior leaders said, we can't afford that. And they said, okay, tell us what you can afford and we'll reverse engineer it, because this is what it costs if that's the goal. And they said, well, what if we reduce the goal and you go back and redo the plan? And so it went kind of back and forth, but there's that important step of aligning the resources with the aspiration. Again, no need to create undue stress, frustration, and anxiety by saying you need to accomplish something that you actually don't have the manpower or the resources to accomplish.
Yeah. And let's think about it a little bit in the relational context there, Mark, too. I mean, how many times have we had maybe we as parents, or we had a parent who put unrealistic expectations on us? It actually frays that relationship. And so in the workplace, same way, if we're putting an expectation on somebody to do something and we can't afford to do it or resource it, don't be surprised if again, I guess phrase the relationship is a good way to say it. It's disengagement's what's going to happen. People will be disheartened by that unrealistic expectation. And so we need to make sure that we're careful there. Okay. One more thing I want to say here, or one more question I want to make sure we don't lose sight of on our plan. And that's, how are we going to measure our success? I think it's so important for us to have goals, but how are we going to count it? What's the scorecard going to look like? Do we have a way to measure our success along the way? Do we have markers, benchmarks that we're going to try to get to at certain places along, Q1? A lot of times we'll measure it, quarterly earnings or whatever. But I think it's so important for us to not forget to put in our plan, this is how we're going to measure that. And everybody knows. And now we can go chase what we're trying to do much more thoughtfully and strategically. And we can know, are we winning or not? And there may be times we can adjust that number if we start to accelerate past that. I was with a company a few weeks ago speaking. They said, we're just crushing our numbers for the first half of the year. I said, that's great. what are you thinking? And they said, we actually are going to raise our number for the last half. And so you can raise it, or, hopefully you don't have to pull it back, but you want to make sure that you have a way to count what counts.
Yeah, and let me just add a little color. And my bias here is you could take a very, let's just call it legalistic view, and that is measurement. Some people would look at that and go, well, if you've got a plan, all you're measuring is, did you execute the plan? Well, that would be a measure. But remember, the plan is in service of the goals. So I would suggest you measure both activities and outcomes. I referenced it earlier. You may be on track with the activities, but they're not generating the outcome. That's when you need to call an audible. You're running the play you designed, but it's not working. So the plan matters, but the plan is not about the plan. The plan is about the outcome. So I think this conversation about how will you measure success is a real conversation. And I think it has two parts.
That's great. Okay. So that's a bunch of questions. I think you got a bonus question here that I think is important. Let's don't lose that before we go.
Yeah. And it's how will we structure to accomplish our goals and to execute the plan? A lot of organizations, and you and I both run into this throughout our careers, too many organizations fall victims to their structure. And the best leaders know that structure should enable, not inhibit, the performance of the organization. And once you realize what you're trying to accomplish, you may need to adjust your structure in order to have the best odds of success at executing the plan. I think leaders need to hold structure loosely, and some do, but far too many get locked in and they become a prisoner of their own structure. Your goals, your strategies, your tactics, your plan should give you clues as to how you should be structured, not the other way around.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I'm hoping people will be able to take some of these questions and begin to think about their plan. Mark and I would love to hear your questions. If you have some questions you use for planning, send us an email, info@leadeveryday.com. We'd love to hear from you. That'd be great. Also want to mention here at the end, Mark, our book, Lead Every Day, the book is out, our operating system, these disciplines that we have, they're out in the world now, as you know, and been out for just 3 or 4 weeks now. And I saw, Mark, that we hit, I think we got the number 2 on Amazon's new releases then in the business category. So that was exciting. But if you've not picked up your copy, you can push us up to number 1 by getting a copy of Lead Every Day. That'd be awesome. Check that out. And I think that really can help you and your organization. Okay. So we talked about planning today for your organization, your team. Mark, I think it'd be great if we talk about individual planning next week. So let's do that. We'll make that commitment to you guys. And I hope you'll join us next week. Please keep sharing with the people that you care about, and we'll see you next week. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.